Hello everyone, welcome back to Insomnia Protocol. Tonight, we have another terrifying horror story for you. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and leave a comment below. Now, get ready. And let's dive in. I was about 2 hours into the drive back to Ohio when the check engine light came on again. I remember gripping the steering wheel a little tighter and muttering, "Of course you did," like the car could hear me. The heater had stopped working sometime during the previous winter. The driver's side window had been stuck halfway shut for almost a year. Every pothole made something rattle under the hood, and every new sound sent my mind straight to dollar signs I didn't have. I pulled into a gas station just outside Toledo because I needed gas and because I needed a minute to think. The place looked exactly like every highway gas station in the Midwest, faded signs advertising lottery tickets, burnt coffee sitting under fluorescent lights, a tired cashier counting cigarettes behind the register. I bought the cheapest cup of coffee they had and stood outside by my car while the pump slowly climbed toward an amount I was already regretting. Then I opened my banking app. I had enough money to fill the tank or buy groceries for the week. Not both. I sat back in the driver's seat staring at the numbers on my screen while trying to do the kind of math adults aren't supposed to talk about out loud. How many days could I stretch a box of pasta? How long before my landlord started asking questions? Could I put off replacing the brake pads one more month? I had left my last job 3 weeks earlier, after the company announced another round of layoffs. Officially, my position had been restructured. Unofficially, I'd spent the better part of a decade giving everything I had to a place that replaced me with an email. I had been sending out applications ever since. Most companies never responded. The ones that did usually started with, "We appreciate your interest." My phone buzzed against the center console, pulling me out of my thoughts. Mark. I hadn't spoken to him since high school graduation. Back then, we used to spend Friday nights driving around town with no destination, convinced we'd have our lives figured out by 25. We were both very wrong. I answered anyway. After a few awkward minutes of catching up, he got straight to the point. "You still looking for work?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, watching the gas pump click past another dollar I couldn't really spare. Pretty desperately, actually. There was a pause on the other end. Then Mark said something that, at the time, sounded like exactly the kind of break I'd been waiting for. "Listen, if you're really that strapped for cash, I know a place that's hiring." Mark worked maintenance at an amusement park about 40 minutes outside Columbus. I almost laughed when he said it. Not because the job sounded bad, because I was 32 years old and sitting in a gas station parking lot, trying to decide between gasoline and groceries, and somehow an amusement park was entering the conversation. "Maintenance," I said, "like fixing rides, some rides, mostly general stuff. They hiring full-time. They are hiring anybody who shows up sober and can turn a wrench." I looked at my dashboard. The check engine light glowed back at me. "What is the catch?" "Night shift," I waited. "That is it. That is it." Another pause followed. I could hear wind through his phone. "The pay is decent," he said. "Better than most places around here." "Why are they so desperate?" Mark hesitated. "People quit." "That does not exactly help." He laughed. "It is a weird place." "Weird how?" "You know how every job has its own nonsense." "Sure. This one has more than average." At that point, I did not care. I had spent 3 weeks getting rejection emails. I had maybe another month before rent became a serious problem. Weird sounded manageable. Being broke was not. Mark gave me a number to call. I wrote it down on a receipt. The interview happened 2 days later. The park sat outside a small town I had never visited. The place looked older than I expected. Not abandoned, not run down, just old, like it belonged in a different decade. Bright colors covered everything. Fresh paint covered fences and buildings. But beneath it all, the place felt stuck in time. Families filled the walkways. Children carried balloons. Music drifted from speakers hidden among flower beds. It looked normal, maybe even pleasant. The operations manager interviewed me in a cramped office behind the main entrance. His name was Dennis. He looked exhausted, not tired from one bad day. The kind of exhausted that settles into a person permanently. He glanced over my resume for maybe 30 seconds. Then he hired me. I wish I was exaggerating. 30 seconds. That was it. You have maintenance experience. Some. You can work nights. Yes. Can you start Monday? I can. He stood and offered his hand. Welcome aboard. The entire thing felt suspiciously easy. Still, I signed the paperwork. 4 days later, I reported for my first shift. Night maintenance started at 10 in the evening. The park closed at 1 in the morning. Most of our work happened afterward. Repairs, inspections, cleaning equipment, replacing lights. Things guests never noticed. The crew was small, maybe 12 people total. Most seemed normal enough, tired people working strange hours. The break room conversations centered around bills, sports, and complaining about management. Nothing unusual. Around midnight, Mark finally found me near the maintenance garage. He looked older than I remembered. More gray in his beard, more lines around his eyes. How is it so far? Easy money. Give it time. I smiled. That sounds encouraging. He did not smile back. Dennis give you the handbook yet? Yeah. Not the employee handbook. Then what handbook? Mark looked around before answering. Nobody stood nearby. The other one. You will get it after closing. I assumed he was joking. He was not. At 1:15 in the morning, after the last guests left, Dennis gathered the maintenance crew inside a storage room. He handed each of us a folded packet. Mine looked photocopied hundreds of times. The pages were worn, the corners bent. Dennis spoke in the same tone people use during fire safety briefings. Casual, bored, rehearsed. Read it before tomorrow night. Somebody groaned. Dennis ignored them. The rules exist for a reason. Another worker rolled his eyes. Here we go again. Several people laughed. Nobody looked surprised. I opened the packet once everyone dispersed. The first page contained 6 rules. I read them twice, then a third time. Rule 1 instructed employees never to wave at people standing outside the park fence. Rule 2 mentioned parade music after 3 in the morning. Rule 3 warned against accepting food from guests. Rule 4 involved a crying child. Rule 5 prohibited riding attractions while off duty. Rule 6 involved thanking a janitor near the castle before leaving work. I stared at the pages for several seconds. Then I found Mark. This is some kind of joke. No, you are serious. Very. Why would anyone believe this? Mark sighed. I know how it sounds. It sounds insane. Read it again tomorrow. Mark, just read it. He walked away before I could continue. I drove home annoyed. The rules felt like an elaborate prank. Some weird workplace tradition designed to mess with new employees. By the following evening, I had almost forgotten about them. The shift started normally. A broken gate latch, a faulty light fixture. Nothing exciting. Around 11:30, I noticed something odd. A man stood outside the perimeter fence near the employee parking lot. He was waving. Not frantically, not aggressively. Just standing there with one hand raised. I glanced around. Nobody else seemed concerned. One of the older maintenance workers noticed me looking. Do not wave back. Seriously. Seriously. Why? He shrugged. Because I like having coworkers. Then he kept walking. The man remained there another minute. Then he left. I forgot about him until later. Around 2 in the morning, I was replacing bulbs near a food stand. The park was nearly empty. Only employees remained. I happened to look toward a nearby pathway. A man stood beneath a lamp. He looked familiar. It took several seconds to realize why. He was the same man from the fence. My stomach tightened. There should have been no way. The gates were closed. Security monitored every entrance. He stood perfectly still, watching me. Then he turned and disappeared behind a building. I told myself there had to be another explanation. Somebody who looked similar. Somebody already inside the park. A coincidence. Even then, I did not completely believe it. Around 3 that morning, while crossing the central plaza, I heard music, faint at first, trumpets, drums, distant applause. I stopped walking. The sound drifted through the darkness. My first thought was speakers malfunctioning. Then I remembered Rule 2. I actually laughed, a nervous laugh, the kind people make when something feels wrong. The music continued, slow, steady, coming from Main Street. Then came children's laughter. My smile disappeared. Every hair on my arms stood up. The plaza around me was empty. No workers. No guests. Just darkness and distant music. I remembered the rule. Keep your eyes down. Stay where you are. Wait until it stops. Part of me wanted to look. Part of me desperately wanted proof that this was some stupid misunderstanding. But something deep inside me refused. The laughter sounded closer now. The applause louder. I lowered my eyes toward the pavement and stood perfectly still. The music continued for several minutes. Then it faded. Silence returned. Complete silence. I looked up. The plaza remained empty. Nothing moved. Nothing stood on Main Street. Yet my heart would not slow down. At 5 a.m, my shift finally ended. I headed toward the employee exit. Near the castle, an old janitor pushed a broom across the same stretch of pavement. Back and forth. Back and forth. Exactly as described in Rule 6. He looked ancient. Thin shoulders. Gray uniform. Wrinkled hands. For a second I considered walking past him. Then I remembered the handbook. It felt ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Still, after everything else, I decided it cost nothing. "Thank you," I said as I passed. The old man stopped sweeping. He lifted his head. His eyes met mine. Then he nodded once. I kept walking. Behind me, the broom resumed its steady rhythm across the pavement. Somehow that sound bothered me more than the music had. Because for the first time since arriving, I had the uncomfortable feeling that the rules were not written as a joke. They were written by people trying very hard to stay alive. I spent most of the next day trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Lack of sleep can do strange things. Working overnight does not help. Neither does spending hours alone in a nearly empty amusement park. By the time I returned for my next shift, I had almost talked myself into believing that everything had been a coincidence. The man near the fence had probably entered earlier. The music had probably been some malfunction. The janitor was just an old employee doing his job. Those explanations felt thin, but they were better than the alternatives. The evening started quietly. The weather had changed overnight. Gray clouds covered the sky. A cold wind moved through the park. Guests hurried between attractions. Many carried jackets despite it being summer. Around midnight, rain began falling. Nothing heavy, just a steady drizzle that made the pavement shine beneath the lights. Most visitors left early. By closing time, the park felt emptier than usual. Mark and I spent nearly an hour repairing a gate motor near the western section. The work helped distract me. Normal problems felt comforting. Loose bolts, worn wiring, rust, things that made sense. Around 1:30, we finished and started walking back toward the maintenance building. That was when we heard security radios crackling. Several voices spoke rapidly. Mark immediately stopped walking. His expression changed. I noticed it right away. People tell the truth with their faces long before words. Something was wrong. One of the security guards hurried past us. Mark grabbed his arm. The guard looked nervous, pale, sweating despite the cold air. They exchanged a quick conversation. Then the guard continued running. I looked at Mark. He rubbed his forehead. For several seconds he said nothing. Finally I asked what happened. "A kid," he said. "Missing." I felt a knot form in my stomach. Missing how? Nobody knows. Parents reported him after closing. Security cannot find him. We started walking again, faster this time. Missing children happen. Every large park deals with it eventually. Yet something about Mark worried me. He looked more afraid than concerned. Near the maintenance garage, several workers stood together discussing the situation. Nobody sounded surprised. That bothered me. They sounded tired, like they had heard the same story before. One older mechanic noticed me listening. He lowered his voice. Was the child talking? I frowned. What do you mean? He glanced toward Mark, then away. Never mind. The conversation ended there. Around 2:15, I received an assignment alone. A faulty breaker had shut down lighting near a small attraction called River Run. The ride sat at the edge of the property. Few guests visited after dark. I loaded tools onto a cart and headed out. Rain continued falling. The pathway was empty. Water dripped from trees. Wind rattled branches overhead. The deeper I moved into the park, the quieter everything became. Eventually, even the distant maintenance noises disappeared. Only rain remained. I reached the electrical box and began working. The problem turned out to be simple. A damaged connection. 10 minutes at most. I was tightening the last component when I heard crying. At first I thought it was wind. Then I heard it again. Soft. Weak. Definitely a child. Every muscle in my body tightened. Rule 4 surfaced instantly in my mind. Ask where their parents are exactly once. If they answer, contact security. If they remain silent, walk away. If they ask for help finding their parents, run. I hated that I remembered every word. The crying continued. Somewhere beyond the ride entrance, I stood there for several moments debating what to do. Logic told me it was probably the missing child. A real child. A scared child. Eventually, I followed the sound. The attraction sat surrounded by trees. Shadows covered most of the area. Rain made visibility worse. The crying grew louder as I approached. Then I saw the child. A little girl stood beneath a lamp, maybe 8 years old, maybe younger. Dark hair hung over her face. Water soaked her clothes. She looked completely alone. My heart pounded. This was ridiculous. It had to be coincidence. Yet I could not ignore the rule. I swallowed hard. Where are your parents? The girl stopped crying. Silence filled the pathway. Slowly she raised her head. I could not clearly see her face through the darkness and rain. Several long seconds passed. Then she spoke. Her voice sounded small, almost normal. I cannot find them. Every hair on my neck stood up. Those were not the words from the rule. Not exactly. Close enough. My feet refused to move. The girl took one step forward. Can you help me find them? The world seemed to narrow around those words. Rain struck the pavement. Wind moved through trees. Somewhere far away, a metal sign creaked. I remembered the final instruction. Run. Every rational thought screamed against it. Running from a lost child felt insane. Yet the fear inside me arrived instantly. Pure and overwhelming. I turned and ran. I did not look back. I sprinted through rain and darkness. My tools remained behind. I did not care. Footsteps sounded behind me. Small footsteps. Fast footsteps. They matched my speed perfectly. Terror flooded through me. I ran harder. The footsteps remained. Closer now. Then farther. Then close again. Like something was playing with distance. I reached a brighter section of the park and nearly collided with another worker. The footsteps vanished immediately. Gone. Completely gone. The worker stared at me. You look terrible. I bent over trying to catch my breath. There was a kid. His expression changed instantly. Where? I pointed toward River Run. He immediately grabbed a radio. Within minutes, security arrived. They searched the entire area. They found nothing. No child. No footprints. No evidence. Nothing. I did not tell them everything. I told them enough. Mark found me later in the break room. We sat alone. Rain tapped against the windows. I finally told him the full story. Every detail. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded slowly, like he had expected it. Then he said something that made me feel even worse. You are lucky. Lucky. The word sounded absurd. He leaned back in his chair. One guy followed a crying child 3 years ago. Thought the rules were nonsense. What happened? Nobody knows. Security footage showed him entering a tunnel. He never came out. Nobody found a body. Nobody found anything. Silence settled between us. I stared at the table. Mark stared at the rain. Eventually, I asked the question that had been building since my first night. "What is this place?" He laughed softly. Not because it was funny, because he did not have an answer. "If you figure it out, tell me." Around 4 in the morning, the rain finally stopped. My shift ended an hour later. As usual, I walked toward the exit. As usual, the old janitor worked near the castle. Back and forth. Same path, same broom, same slow movements. This time I stopped. The old man continued sweeping. Up close, he looked even older. His uniform seemed decades out of date. The fabric looked worn thin, yet somehow spotless. "Thank you," I said. The broom stopped. He raised his head. His eyes met mine. Then something happened. The old man smiled, only slightly, barely noticeable. But it was the first expression I had seen from him. A strange feeling settled in my chest, relief mixed with dread, because for some reason, that small smile felt important. As I turned away, the old man spoke. His voice sounded dry, like leaves moving across pavement. First words I had ever heard from him. "Be careful tomorrow night." I froze. When I looked back, he was sweeping again. Nothing about him appeared unusual, yet my stomach dropped. "Why tomorrow night?" I asked. The old man never looked up. "The parade comes when it rains." Then he fell silent. The broom continued moving. Back and forth, back and forth. I stood there several seconds before leaving. The sky was beginning to brighten beyond the parking lot. Morning was coming. Yet for the first time since taking the job, I found myself afraid of returning. Not because of what I had already seen, because of what might be waiting tomorrow night after 3 in the morning. The entire drive home stayed with me. Rainwater still clung to my windshield. Dawn slowly brightened the horizon, yet my thoughts never left the park. Specifically, they never left the janitor's warning. The parade comes when it rains. I slept badly that day. Every few hours I woke up, sometimes from dreams, sometimes for no reason at all. Once I woke convinced I heard distant marching music. The sound disappeared immediately. By evening, I felt exhausted. I considered calling off work. Then I checked my bank account. That ended the discussion. Rent was due soon. Fear did not pay bills. At 9:45, I pulled into the employee parking lot. Clouds still covered the sky. The rain had stopped hours earlier, but moisture remained everywhere. Puddles reflected yellow lights. The air smelled damp and cold. Several workers stood near the entrance smoking cigarettes. Nobody seemed relaxed. Conversation stayed quiet. People kept glancing toward the park. Mark arrived a few minutes later. He looked worse than usual. "You heard it too last night." I already knew what he meant. The music. He nodded. Most of the crew did. We entered together. The shift began normally enough. Guests filled the walkways. Children laughed. Rides operated without issues. If someone had visited during daylight hours, nothing would have seemed unusual. That contrast bothered me. The park felt almost too normal, like it worked very hard to appear harmless. Around midnight, the crowd finally began thinning. Clouds blocked the moon. Darkness settled over everything. Maintenance assignments kept us busy. I spent nearly an hour replacing damaged lights along Main Street. During that time, I noticed something strange. Several employees seemed nervous about the approaching hour. They checked watches frequently. One security guard walked the same route 3 times. Another kept staring toward the parade route. Nobody mentioned it directly. Nobody needed to. Everyone knew what time was coming. At 1 in the morning, the gates closed. Guests slowly exited. Cleanup crews began working. Rides shut down one by one. The park entered its nighttime routine. Around 2:30, Mark found me near a maintenance shed. He handed me a flashlight. "Keep this charged." "Why?" "Just keep it charged." His answer did not help. Then he walked away. By 2:55, the entire atmosphere had changed. Even the air felt different. Colder somehow. Heavier. I stood near an attraction called Thunder Run, inspecting a control panel. The park had become almost completely silent. No wind. No machinery. No voices. Then 3 o'clock arrived. At first, nothing happened. I almost felt relieved. Maybe the janitor had been wrong. Maybe tonight would remain normal. Then the music started. Soft trumpet notes drifted through darkness. My stomach immediately tightened. The sound came from Main Street, exactly where the rule described. Drums followed seconds later. Slow rhythmic beats, then applause. Distant at first, growing louder. I lowered my eyes toward the pavement. Every instinct wanted to look. Curiosity can be powerful, especially when fear mixes with it. Yet I remembered the child. I remembered the footsteps. The rules existed for a reason. The music continued building. More instruments joined. More voices. It sounded like an actual parade moving through the park. Then came laughter. Hundreds of voices laughing together. My hands trembled. The sound felt wrong somehow, not because it was frightening, because it sounded happy. Genuine happiness. The kind heard during family vacations, birthday parties, summer festivals. That made it worse. Minutes passed, maybe 5, maybe 10. Time felt strange. Then I heard footsteps approaching. Slow footsteps. Adult footsteps. Someone stopped beside me. I could sense their presence. Close enough to touch. A man's voice spoke calmly. "Beautiful tonight." I said nothing. The voice continued. "You can look. Everyone else is." My heartbeat accelerated. The voice sounded normal. Friendly even. That frightened me more. "You are missing it." Still I remained silent. Several seconds passed. Then the footsteps resumed, walking away. I never raised my head. Eventually the music faded. The laughter disappeared. Silence returned. I waited another minute before looking up. The pathway remained empty. No one stood nearby. Nothing moved. My radio suddenly crackled. Multiple voices spoke at once. Panic filled every transmission. Security units responded across the park. Employees hurried in different directions. Something had happened. I answered the nearest call. A supervisor directed me toward Main Street. I arrived minutes later. Several workers already gathered there. One employee was missing. His name was Caleb. 21 years old. Seasonal worker. Somebody last saw him shortly before 3. Security footage showed him standing near an attraction. Then turning toward the parade route. Then walking away from the camera. Nobody saw him again. The footage never captured what he followed. The rest of the shift passed in chaos. Search teams checked every building, every ride, every storage area. Nothing. Caleb had simply vanished. Nobody said the obvious thing aloud. Yet everyone thought it. He looked. By sunrise, no trace of him existed. Not a shoe, not a radio, nothing. I left work shaken. The rules had consequences. Real consequences. That realization settled heavily inside me. The following evening, I arrived early. Mostly because I wanted answers. Before clocking in, I searched employee records in the maintenance office. It took nearly an hour. Eventually, I found what I wanted. Missing workers. There were more than I expected. Far more. Some records stretched back decades. Different jobs. Different years. Different circumstances. Yet several names shared one thing. No official explanation. Just missing. Gone. As if they had stepped out of existence. A voice behind me nearly made me jump. Looking for something. Dennis stood in the doorway. I quickly closed the file. Just curious. He stared at me for several seconds. Then entered the room. "Sit down." His tone surprised me. I obeyed. Dennis lowered himself into a chair across from me. He looked tired. More tired than ever. "You want answers?" It was not a question. I nodded. He rubbed his eyes. "You will not get many. Try me." For a while he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. The park opened in 1953. Strange things started almost immediately. Reports, sightings, disappearances. Nobody understood why. Nobody understands now. Then why keep operating? He laughed softly. Because people keep coming. Because money keeps flowing. Because owners change and problems remain. Because closing it never worked. That last sentence caught my attention. Never worked. Dennis looked away. They tried twice. Both times people died. A chill ran through me. What happened? Nobody knows exactly. Records disappeared. Witnesses changed stories. But after the second attempt, the park reopened. It has remained open ever since. The room felt colder. Dennis stood. One more thing. He paused near the door. The rules change occasionally. Most stay the same. One does not. Which one? Rule 3. Never accept food from guests. Why? His expression darkened. Because whatever offers food learns faster than everything else. Then he left. I sat alone for several minutes. That conversation stayed with me all night. Around closing time, I found myself working near a popcorn stand. The irony was not lost on me. Empty bags blew across wet pavement. The area remained deserted. Then I noticed someone standing nearby. An elderly woman. She wore clothing that looked decades old. Not costume old. Genuinely old. She smiled pleasantly. For one brief moment, I assumed she was lost. Then I remembered the park had closed 20 minutes earlier. Employees had already cleared this section. The woman extended her hand. A small paper bag rested in her palm. Fresh popcorn filled it. The smell drifted through the air. Warm butter, salt, comforting, familiar. My stomach tightened. Rule 3. The woman continued smiling. Her eyes never blinked. Take some. Her voice sounded gentle, like a grandmother offering a treat. I stepped backward. No, thank you. The smile widened slightly. Take some. I repeated my refusal. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then her expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. The warmth disappeared. Her face became blank, empty. The woman lowered the bag. Then she walked away. Not quickly, not angrily, just turned and left. I watched until she disappeared behind a building. The moment she vanished, every light near the popcorn stand flickered simultaneously. Then darkness swallowed the area. I stood completely still. My flashlight shook in my hand. Somewhere beyond the darkness, I heard the faint sound of popcorn falling onto pavement, one kernel at a time. And for the first time since starting this job, I began wondering whether surviving until Chapter 10 would be possible at all. The sound continued long after the woman disappeared. Tiny kernels striking concrete, one after another, slow, deliberate. I kept my flashlight pointed toward the darkness. Nothing appeared. Eventually, the sound stopped. The silence afterward felt worse. I finished my shift without incident, but my nerves never settled. By that point, the rules no longer seemed unusual. They felt practical, like safety instructions near dangerous machinery. The difference was that nobody understood the machinery. The next several nights passed quietly, at least by the park's standards. No missing employees, no parade, no crying children. The strange things remained small. A shadow standing where nobody should stand. Laughter coming from an empty ride. Footsteps heard after closing. Things people mentioned casually before changing subjects. I learned something important during that period. Most employees survived by refusing curiosity. They followed the rules and avoided questions. The people who dug deeper rarely lasted. That realization should have convinced me to do the same. Instead, it had the opposite effect. Maybe because I had already seen too much. Maybe because unanswered questions bothered me. Either way, I started paying attention. One night during lunch, I sat beside an older mechanic named Raymond. He had worked there almost 20 years, longer than nearly anyone else. If somebody knew something, it was him. We ate in silence for several minutes. Then I asked about the janitor. Raymond immediately stopped chewing. Not a good sign. What about him? Who is he? Raymond looked around before answering. Nobody knows. You have worked here 20 years. Nobody hired him. Nobody trained him. Nobody remembers meeting him. I frowned. That makes no sense. Raymond nodded. Exactly. He finished his sandwich and stood. Then he paused. He has always been there. Since the beginning. The beginning of what? The park. Then he walked away. The conversation stayed with me. Especially because Raymond was not joking. Later that week, I searched old photographs stored in the administration building. Most documented park history, grand openings, anniversary celebrations, employee events, hundreds of images stretched across decades. I nearly missed it. In a photograph from the 1950s, workers stood near the castle. Families smiled behind them. Balloons floated overhead. Near the edge of the image stood a familiar figure, an old janitor holding a broom. My stomach dropped. The photograph looked over 70 years old. Yet the man appeared identical. Same uniform, same face, same posture. I found him in another photograph, then another. Different decades, same appearance. No aging, no change. The realization left me unsettled for the rest of the night. Around midnight, Mark found me reviewing the pictures. "You should stop doing that." He sounded serious. I showed him the photographs. His expression darkened. "Yeah, I found those years ago. You never told anyone. What would be the point?" He sat beside me. "People who investigate things here tend to attract attention." "Attention from who?" Mark looked toward the door. That was answer enough. The following evening brought another problem. The weather turned unusually warm. Humidity covered everything. Thick fog drifted across sections of the park after sunset. Visibility dropped significantly. Guests complained. Security increased patrols. Around 11, Dennis gathered several maintenance workers. He looked worried, more worried than usual. "We have reports from the Eastern Midway." "Reports of what?" "Guests waving at someone outside the fence." The room became silent. Several workers exchanged nervous looks. Dennis continued, "Security is handling it. Avoid the area unless necessary." Nobody argued. I received an assignment there anyway. A faulty light transformer needed inspection. By midnight, I found myself walking through dense fog toward the eastern fence line. The atmosphere felt completely different. Lights glowed through mist like distant stars. Shapes appeared and disappeared constantly. Every shadow looked like a person. Every tree resembled a figure standing still. I reached the transformer without issue. The repair itself took only minutes. Then I noticed movement ahead. Somebody stood outside the fence. A woman this time. She looked young, maybe 30. Hard to tell through the fog. She stood motionless, watching the park, one hand slowly raised, waving. My pulse quickened. Rule 1 surfaced immediately. Ignore them completely. I turned away and focused on my work. Several seconds passed. Then I heard another voice nearby. "Hey!" I looked over. A security guard approached from the pathway. His name was Travis. We had worked together before. He seemed distracted. "Did you see her?" He pointed toward the fence. I hesitated. "Yeah." Travis stared at the woman. Strange. He lifted his hand. My stomach dropped. "Travis." He waved back. The woman immediately stopped moving. Every sound vanished. Even insects seemed to fall silent. Travis lowered his hand. Confusion crossed his face. "What?" I grabbed his arm. "We need to leave. Now." He laughed nervously. "You are acting crazy." Then he froze. The woman was gone. The fence line stood empty. Fog drifted through darkness. Nothing else remained. Travis suddenly looked uncomfortable. We returned to the maintenance building. Neither of us discussed it further. Around 2 in the morning, somebody reported seeing Travis near the arcade. Then another report placed him near the Ferris wheel. Then another near the food court. The strange part was timing. Multiple sightings occurred simultaneously. People described him in different locations at once. By 3, everyone was looking for him. Security footage revealed something even worse. Cameras repeatedly captured Travis walking through empty sections of the park, always following somebody. A woman, the same woman from the fence. She appeared briefly in footage, then vanished between frames. At 4:30, Travis still had not been found. The search continued until sunrise. Nothing. Another employee gone. The second disappearance in less than 2 weeks. Nobody needed an investigation to understand why. He broke Rule 1. The consequence followed almost immediately. That morning I stayed longer than usual. I wanted fresh air before driving home. Dawn painted the sky gray. Fog still covered portions of the property. Near the castle, the janitor continued sweeping. Same path, same rhythm. I approached carefully. "Thank you." The old man nodded. This time I did not leave. After several seconds he looked up. "You ask too many questions." His voice sounded dry and distant. "I know." The broom continued moving. "Questions open doors." "What doors?" The old man stared at me. "Doors that notice when they are opened." A chill moved through me. I thought about leaving. Instead, I asked another question. "What is really happening here?" For a long moment he remained silent. Then he pointed toward the castle. Not the building itself, the ground beneath it. Something was buried here. When? Long ago. Before rides. Before lights. Before roads. The old man's eyes never left mine. People built a park over a wound. The statement sounded absurd. Yet something about his tone prevented laughter. What kind of wound? His expression changed slightly. Sadness, perhaps, or regret, one that never healed. Then the conversation ended. The janitor returned to sweeping. No matter what I asked afterward, he ignored me. Eventually I left. During the drive home, his words repeated endlessly in my mind. A wound that never healed. That explanation sounded impossible, yet it somehow made more sense than anything else. Because whatever lived inside that park felt less like a haunting, less like ghosts, more like something ancient trapped beneath layers of concrete and cheerful music, something waiting patiently beneath the castle. And for the first time, I began suspecting the rules were not protecting employees from the park. The rules were protecting the park from whatever wanted to get out. That thought stayed with me for days. The rules were not keeping us safe from random supernatural events. They were barriers. Small defenses against something larger. Something that had existed long before the park. Once that idea settled into my head, many details began feeling different. The missing workers, the strange guests, the parade. None of them seemed separate anymore. They felt connected, like symptoms of the same problem. Unfortunately, realizing that changed nothing. I still needed money. I still needed the job. Every evening I drove back through the gates. Every morning I left wondering if I would return. Life outside the park remained frustratingly normal. Bills arrived. Grocery prices climbed. My landlord sent reminders. Meanwhile, inside the park, people vanished. The contrast became harder to accept. One night near the end of August, Dennis called a maintenance meeting. Everyone gathered in a storage room behind the castle. The atmosphere felt tense. More employees were present than usual. Even security supervisors attended. Dennis waited until the room quieted. Then he spoke. "We have another problem." Nobody seemed surprised. That worried me. Dennis continued. "Several rides have activated after closing. Nobody touched them. A few workers exchanged nervous glances. Which rides? Thunder Run, Sky Wheel, River Run. My stomach tightened at the familiar names. The rides remember who operates them. Rule 5. Never ride an attraction while off duty. Dennis rubbed his forehead. If any ride starts moving tonight, report it immediately. Do not approach. Do not investigate alone. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As we filed out, Mark walked beside me. "You ever hear how Rule 5 started?" I shook my head. Mark looked uncomfortable. "My uncle worked here. Years ago. Before me." He paused. "One night he rode Sky Wheel after his shift. Thought the rule was stupid." "What happened?" Mark stared toward the castle. "He came back the next night. Then the next. Then every night after that." A cold feeling settled inside me. "You mean physically?" "I mean he died 15 years ago." I did not know how to respond. Around midnight, I found myself assigned near Sky Wheel. The attraction sat toward the northern section, a large Ferris wheel visible from almost anywhere. During daylight it looked cheerful. At night it felt different. The massive structure disappeared into darkness overhead. Lights blinked along its frame. Wind occasionally rattled the cabins. The ride remained closed, empty, silent. I completed routine inspections and prepared to leave. Then I heard machinery start. The sound froze me immediately. Motors hummed. Gears shifted. Slowly, the wheel began moving. Every light illuminated simultaneously. My pulse accelerated. The attraction should have been powerless. Nobody stood nearby. Yet the wheel continued turning. I grabbed my radio. Before I could speak, movement caught my eye. Someone sat inside one of the cabins. Then another. Then another. My stomach dropped. Every cabin contained passengers. Dozens of them. They sat perfectly still. Most wore outdated clothing. Different decades. Different styles. Yet all faced forward. None moved. None spoke. The wheel rotated slowly against the dark sky. One cabin descended toward ground level. A man sat inside. Middle-aged. Gray work uniform. Maintenance badge. He looked familiar. Then I remembered Mark's story. His uncle. The resemblance was unmistakable. The cabin continued descending. As it passed nearby, the man turned his head. He smiled. Then he waved. My heart nearly stopped. The smile never changed. The wave continued mechanically. Up and down. Up and down. Every other passenger began waving too. Hundreds of hands moving together. Slow. Synchronized. I backed away. The radio nearly slipped from my grip. Security. North section. Sky wheel. Now. My voice sounded strained. The wheel continued turning. More cabins passed. More smiling faces. Some looked ancient. Others looked recent. One face made my blood run cold. Caleb, the missing employee. He sat among them, smiling, waving, as though he had always belonged there. Security arrived minutes later. By then the ride had stopped. Every cabin sat empty. Every light was dark. Nobody found evidence of activation. According to control systems, the ride had never started. Nobody questioned my report. That frightened me most. They believed me immediately, because similar things had happened before. The next night, I discovered something unusual. Someone had left an envelope inside my locker. No name, no markings, just a plain envelope. Inside rested several yellowed pages, photocopies from old records, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes. I spent lunch reading everything. Most articles described accidents near the property long before the park existed. Missing travelers, strange disappearances, unexplained deaths. The oldest clipping dated back to 1887. One passage caught my attention. Local residents avoid the hill after dark. Reports describe voices calling from beneath the ground. Several individuals claim deceased relatives appeared near the site. My hands tightened around the page. The castle stood directly atop that hill. Someone had circled the article in red ink. Another note rested behind it, a single handwritten sentence. The castle was built over the entrance. No signature accompanied it. No explanation, just those words. That evening I showed the documents to Mark. His expression darkened. "Where did you get these?" "They were in my locker." He studied the handwriting. Then his face changed. "What?" Mark handed me the note. "Look carefully." I did. The handwriting seemed familiar. It took several seconds to understand why. It matched Dennis. Exactly. Later that night I confronted him. At first he denied everything. Then he sighed and closed his office door. "You were not supposed to find those." "Why leave them?" "Because somebody should know." Dennis sat heavily in his chair. "Every few years things get worse. This year is bad. Worse than normal." "In what way?" "More sightings. More disappearances. More activity near the castle." He rubbed tired eyes. "We think something is changing." "We?" "The people who stayed long enough. The people still alive." Silence filled the room. Then I asked the question, "What is under the castle?" Dennis stared at me for a long time. Eventually he answered, "We do not know." The response frustrated me. "You just said there is an entrance." "We found tunnels. Old tunnels. Older than the park. Older than the town. Nobody explored very far." "Why not?" Dennis looked away. Nobody came back the same. Those words lingered long after our conversation ended. Near 4 in the morning, I found myself working close to the castle. The area remained quiet, empty. The usual janitor swept his path nearby. I watched him for several moments. Then I approached. "Thank you." The old man nodded. I hesitated before speaking again. "There are tunnels beneath the castle." The broom stopped. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the janitor spoke. There were tunnels. Something moved below them. A chill spread through my chest. What moved? His eyes met mine. Hunger. The simple answer felt worse than any detailed explanation. The old man resumed sweeping. I should have walked away. Instead, I asked one final question. Can it leave? The broom stopped again. The janitor looked toward the castle. Not yet. That answer should have reassured me. Somehow it did not. Because of the way he said it. Not yet sounded temporary, like a door slowly weakening, like a lock beginning to fail. And as dawn approached beyond the horizon, I found myself staring at the castle towers and wondering how much longer whatever lived beneath them intended to wait. For the first time since taking the job, I seriously considered quitting. The idea followed me everywhere, during drives home, during sleepless afternoons, during quiet moments when the world felt normal again. Yet every time I opened my banking application, reality returned. The pay from the park had stabilized my life. My rent was current. My refrigerator contained food. The check engine light had finally been repaired. Walking away should have been easy. Somehow it was not. Part of that came from money. Another part came from curiosity. I wanted answers. The problem was that every answer seemed to lead toward something worse. September arrived. Nights grew colder. Crowds became smaller. The park remained open, but attendance dropped steadily. The atmosphere changed with it. Empty pathways appeared more often. Entire sections sat nearly deserted after sunset. Shadows stretched longer. Silence lingered longer. Whatever lived beneath the castle seemed to prefer those quieter nights. At least that was the feeling many employees shared. Nobody openly discussed it, yet I noticed people avoiding certain areas, especially near closing time. One evening, Dennis pulled me aside before my shift. "You are working with me tonight." That surprised me. Managers rarely handled maintenance assignments. What happened? "We need equipment moved beneath the castle." My stomach immediately tightened. Beneath the castle. Dennis noticed my reaction. "Relax. We are not going into the old tunnels. There are service corridors underneath." That explanation did little to help. Around midnight, we entered through a maintenance door, hidden behind decorative stonework. The public never saw this section. Narrow concrete hallways extended beneath the castle. Electrical rooms lined both sides. Pipes ran overhead. The place looked ordinary, almost disappointingly ordinary. For a while, we moved storage crates and replacement equipment. Normal work. Nothing strange. Then I noticed a metal door. Unlike everything else underground, this door looked ancient. Rust covered its surface. Heavy chains wrapped around it. Several industrial locks secured it shut. My attention lingered too long. Dennis followed my gaze. "Do not." I pointed toward the door. "Is that one of the tunnels?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Nobody uses it." The chains looked relatively new. The door itself did not. "How deep does it go?" Dennis ignored the question. We returned to work. Yet the door remained in my thoughts. Every few minutes I found myself glancing toward it. Something about its presence felt wrong. Not threatening exactly. More like pressure, like standing near deep water. Around 1:30, a loud metallic sound echoed through the corridor. Both of us froze. The noise came from behind the chain door. A slow scraping sound followed, metal against stone. Dennis immediately stood. "We are leaving." Another scrape echoed through the hallway. Longer this time, closer. Every hair on my arm stood up. We left the equipment behind and walked quickly toward the exit. Neither of us spoke until we reached the surface. Once outside, Dennis finally exhaled. "Does that happen often?" "More lately." That answer stayed with me. More lately. Not occasionally. Not rarely. More lately. Something was changing. Again. 2 nights later, another incident occurred. One that finally convinced me the situation was escalating. Around 3 in the morning, the parade music returned. No rain this time. No storm. Just music emerging from darkness. I immediately lowered my eyes. Several employees nearby did the same. We had learned our lessons. The music sounded different than before. Louder. Closer. The drums vibrated through the pavement. Applause echoed across empty streets. Then something new happened. Voices began calling names. Individual names. Human names. Familiar names. I heard Caleb first. Then Travis. Then others I did not recognize. The voices sounded cheerful. Inviting. Like old friends greeting arrivals. The effect was deeply unsettling. A few moments later, I heard my own name. My entire body locked up. The voice sounded familiar. Too familiar. My mother. She had died 7 years earlier. The sound nearly broke me. Every instinct demanded I look up. Just once. Just long enough to confirm what I already knew was impossible. The voice repeated my name. Warm. Gentle. Exactly as I remembered. Tears unexpectedly filled my eyes. Grief can survive for years. It waits quietly. Then returns without warning. The voice continued. Closer now. I squeezed my eyes shut. My mother was dead. Whatever spoke was not her. Eventually, the music faded. The voices disappeared. Silence returned. I remained motionless long afterward. When I finally looked up, Mark stood nearby. His face had gone pale. You heard somebody too. He nodded slowly. My father. Neither of us spoke after that. Some experiences require no explanation. The following week brought another discovery. One I wish I had never made. I was assigned to inspect a storage building near the western edge of the property. The structure rarely saw use. Dust covered everything inside. Most equipment dated back decades. While searching for replacement parts, I found an old filing cabinet. Curiosity got the better of me. Several drawers contained maintenance records. Others held photographs. Hundreds of photographs. Most showed employees, staff parties, work crews, anniversary celebrations. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed a pattern. Certain faces appeared repeatedly across decades. Not descendants, not relatives, the same people. Identical appearances, identical expressions. The old janitor was among them. So were others I recognized. A woman from the popcorn stand. A security guard reported missing years earlier. Several faces from the Ferris wheel cabins. My pulse quickened. I continued searching. Eventually, I found the oldest photograph. The image showed construction crews preparing the property before the park existed. Men stood on a bare hillside. Trees surrounded them. Near the center of the image sat a dark opening in the ground. A tunnel entrance. Someone had circled it in black ink. Written beneath was a single sentence. This should have remained buried. A voice behind me nearly stopped my heart. You found them. I spun around. The janitor stood in the doorway. For a moment, I genuinely thought I was hallucinating. I had never seen him outside the castle, yet there he was. Broom in hand. Expression unreadable. You can talk anywhere. The old man nodded. Sometimes. He entered slowly. The room suddenly felt colder. I held up the photograph. What happened here? His eyes settled on the image. People dug too deep. What did they find? The old man remained silent for several seconds. Then he answered. A doorway. That word again. Another doorway. Another entrance. My chest tightened. To what? The janitor looked directly at me. Hunger. The same answer as before. Somehow more disturbing this time. The old man approached the photograph. They opened it. They could not close it. Then they built the park. Why? To cover it. To feed it. The final words hit harder than anything else. Feed it! My mouth suddenly felt dry. Feed it with what? The old man did not answer. Instead, he turned toward the door. Before leaving, he spoke one final sentence. The castle locks are weakening." Then he walked away. I followed immediately. The hallway outside stood empty. Completely empty. The janitor had vanished. No footsteps. No movement. Nothing. That night, I barely worked. My thoughts remained trapped on one horrifying possibility. The park was never built for entertainment. The park was built as a lid, a bright, colorful disguise hiding something beneath. And if the janitor was right, that disguise was beginning to fail. Near sunrise, security radios suddenly erupted with panic. Multiple reports flooded every channel. Loud noises beneath the castle. Vibrations felt across several attractions, cracks appearing in underground walls. Employees rushed in every direction. Dennis ordered everyone away from the central area. I joined the evacuation. Then the ground moved. Not an earthquake, not exactly. More like a single enormous impact from below. The entire park shuddered. Rides rattled. Windows trembled. Somewhere beneath the castle, something struck the underside of the world. Once. Then silence. Complete silence. Nobody spoke afterward. Nobody needed to. Because every employee understood the same thing. Whatever lived below us had just announced that it was awake. And for the rest of the morning, as pale sunlight crept across empty pathways, nobody could shake the feeling that it knew we were there too. Nobody talked about quitting anymore. That was the strange part. Weeks earlier, any employee facing these events would have left, yet most remained. Looking back, I think I understand why. Once you spend enough time inside a place like that, it changes how you think. The impossible becomes routine. The horrifying becomes normal. You stop asking whether something should exist. You focus on surviving another shift. That was exactly what happened to me. The morning after the ground shook, I drove home exhausted. My hands trembled during the entire drive. Every red light felt too long. Every shadow near the road made me glance twice. When I finally reached my apartment, I noticed something sitting on the kitchen table. A bag of popcorn. My stomach dropped immediately. I lived alone. Nobody else had access. The paper bag looked identical to the one offered by the old woman. Fresh butter smell filled the room. For several seconds, I simply stared. Then I grabbed the bag and threw it into a trash bin outside. I did not touch the popcorn itself. The moment I returned inside, I checked every lock. Every window. Every room. Nothing appeared disturbed. Nothing explained how the bag arrived there. Yet I already knew the truth. The park was no longer staying inside the park. That realization followed me into the next shift. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. Security presence doubled. Maintenance teams inspected every structure. Engineers examined the castle foundation. Nobody found a reasonable explanation for the tremor. Officially, it never happened. Unofficially, everyone felt it. Around 11 that night, Dennis gathered supervisors behind the administration building. Mark and I happened to be nearby. Their conversation carried farther than intended. The lower tunnels are collapsing. Somebody said it quietly. Dennis answered immediately. Then seal them. We already tried. Another voice responded. The cracks keep returning. My stomach tightened. Mark heard it too. Neither of us spoke until the meeting ended. Around midnight, a new rule appeared. Literally appeared. A fresh page had been added to the employee handbook. Nobody admitted writing it. Nobody knew where it came from. Yet every copy contained the same addition. Rule 7. If you hear knocking beneath the ground, leave the area immediately. Do not investigate. Do not answer. Do not knock back. Several employees joked nervously about it. Nobody found it funny. The timing alone was enough. At 1:30 in the morning, I learned exactly why the rule existed. I was replacing electrical components near the castle plaza. The area remained empty. Cold wind moved through decorative trees. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then I heard it. Knock. A single sharp impact beneath my feet. I froze. Several seconds passed. Another knock followed. Then another. Slow. Rhythmic. Something underneath the ground was knocking upward. Every muscle in my body tightened. The sound seemed impossibly deep, like it traveled through layers of stone. Yet somehow it remained clear. Knock, knock, knock. The impacts continued. Then stopped. Complete silence followed. I immediately packed my tools and left. I did not need convincing. The next incident happened less than an hour later. Security reported movement inside one of the closed attractions. A dark ride called Storybook River. The ride normally shut down after midnight. Nobody should have been inside. Cameras showed otherwise. Figures walked through the attraction. Dozens of them. Security assumed trespassers. They sent a team to investigate. Only 2 guards entered. 3 emerged. That detail spread through the staff within minutes. Nobody could explain it. The 3rd guard appeared on security footage exiting the attraction. He wore a uniform. He carried a radio. He looked completely normal. Except nobody recognized him. The man simply joined the shift, like he had always worked there. Personnel records contained no information. Employee files showed nothing, yet cameras revealed him walking throughout the property, speaking with workers, performing patrols, existing. By dawn, he disappeared. No footage captured him leaving. No footage captured where he went. The event rattled everyone. Even Dennis looked shaken. That same morning, I found the janitor earlier than usual. He swept the familiar path beside the castle. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. Then I asked about the new rule. The broom slowed. He already answered. What answered? The old man pointed downward. Something knocked once beneath us. My chest tightened. It wants attention. The answer made me uncomfortable. Why? The janitor looked toward the castle towers. Because it is lonely. Of all possible explanations, that one disturbed me most. Not angry, not hungry, lonely. Human emotions attached to something ancient felt wrong. Very wrong. The following week brought colder weather. Autumn settled across Ohio. Leaves covered the park pathways. Decorations appeared for seasonal events. Guests filled the property again. Most remained unaware of what existed beneath their feet. Sometimes I envied them. Then came the phone call. It happened around 10 in the evening before my shift. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something convinced me to answer. The voice on the other end belonged to Caleb. At least it sounded like Caleb. My blood ran cold immediately. He had disappeared weeks earlier. Hello. His voice sounded distant, distorted, like a poor connection. Caleb, where are you? A long pause followed. Then he answered, under the castle. Every hair on my body stood up. The line crackled. You need to help us. Us. More static. We cannot leave. Then the call ended. I stared at my phone for nearly a minute. The number no longer existed when I attempted a return call. That night I told Mark everything. His reaction frightened me, because he looked unsurprised. You are not the first. What do you mean? Others got calls. From missing employees, missing family members, dead relatives. My stomach twisted. Why did nobody tell me? Because hearing them changes people. He rubbed his face. Some start looking for whoever called. Most never stop. The rest of the shift passed quietly, too quietly. The park often felt worse during calm nights, like the silence was gathering strength. Around 3 in the morning, I found myself near the western maintenance road. Fog covered the area. Visibility remained poor. That was when I saw Travis, standing beneath a street lamp, perfectly still. My heart immediately accelerated. Travis had vanished weeks earlier. Yet there he stood. Same uniform, same face, same posture. He slowly raised one hand, waving, exactly like the people beyond the fence. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. I remembered Rule 1. I remembered the Ferris wheel. I remembered the smiling faces. I turned away immediately. When I looked back seconds later, he was gone. No footprints remained. Nothing. The encounter left me shaken. Yet worse waited ahead. Near sunrise, alarms activated beneath the castle. Every radio erupted simultaneously. Emergency codes flooded the channels. Workers rushed toward the central plaza. I arrived minutes later. The scene stopped me cold. A large crack had opened near the castle foundation. Not huge, maybe 6 feet long, but deep, very deep. Darkness filled the opening. Engineers shined lights inside. The beams vanished downward. Nobody saw a bottom. Then somebody noticed writing along the exposed stone. Ancient symbols covered the walls beneath the foundation. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Nobody recognized the language. Yet one thing stood out immediately. The markings had not been carved. They had been scratched. Like something trapped below spent years clawing messages into the stone. A cold silence settled over everyone. Then a sound drifted upward from the darkness. Soft at first, almost impossible to hear. Knocking. 3 slow impacts, coming from somewhere far below. Nobody spoke afterward. Nobody moved. We simply listened. Because for the first time, the thing beneath the castle no longer felt distant. The ground between us had cracked open. The barrier had weakened. And standing there beside that black opening, staring into endless darkness, I finally understood something terrifying. Whatever lived below was no longer trying to get our attention. It was trying to find its way out. The crack remained hidden from guests. Management moved quickly. Construction barriers appeared by afternoon. Decorative fencing covered the damaged area. Signs redirected foot traffic. To visitors, it looked like routine maintenance. Employees knew better. Nobody walked near the castle unless necessary. Even the bravest workers avoided the area after midnight. The knocking continued. Every night, sometimes distant, sometimes loud enough to feel through the pavement. Nobody ever knocked back. Not after Rule 7 appeared. Dennis looked older each day. Dark circles settled beneath his eyes. He spent most shifts underground with engineers and contractors. Whatever they found below, it clearly was not improving the situation. Around the second week of October, another rule appeared. Just like before, nobody claimed responsibility. Yet every handbook contained the new page. Rule 8. If you see an employee standing motionless near the castle after 2 in the morning, do not approach them. Do not speak to them. Do not allow them to follow you. Contact security immediately. Reading it made my stomach sink. The rules were becoming more specific, more desperate. That alone felt dangerous. New rules suggested new problems. The first sighting happened 2 nights later. A ride operator named Emily reported seeing somebody near the castle fountain. The employee stood perfectly still, facing the castle, not moving, not blinking. Security responded within minutes. By the time they arrived, the figure had vanished. Then another report surfaced. Different witness, different location, same behavior, motionless, facing the castle. Security footage eventually captured one. I wish it had not. The employee was Caleb, missing for months. He stood beside the fountain at 3:16 in the morning, completely still. Cameras recorded him for 12 minutes. Then he simply disappeared between frames. No walking away. No visual distortion. Present in one moment, gone in the next. After that, sightings increased rapidly. Caleb appeared repeatedly. So did Travis. So did other missing employees. They never spoke, never moved, always faced the castle, watching, waiting. Around this time, something else changed. Guests started noticing things. Complaints increased. Strange sightings. Missing time. Unexplained phone calls. One family claimed their daughter spent an hour talking with a park employee who did not exist. Security reviewed footage. The child stood alone the entire time. Another guest reported hearing knocking beneath a restroom floor. Management dismissed everything publicly. Privately, panic grew. The situation worsened every night. One evening, Dennis called me into his office. He looked exhausted. "There are things you should know." His tone immediately worried me. He closed the door, then opened a drawer. Inside rested several old notebooks, handwritten journals, employee records, incident reports. I spent nearly an hour reading. The notebooks belonged to previous managers. Some dated back decades. One entry caught my attention. 1978. Increased activity near the castle. New rules required. Several disappearances. Another entry from 1994. Voices heard beneath the foundation. Knocking spread beyond castle grounds. Then one from 2007. Large crack discovered underground. Emergency repairs performed. Casualties withheld from public record. My chest tightened. This had happened before. Not exactly, but similar events. Cycles. Escalations. Temporary recoveries. Dennis watched me carefully. It always comes in waves. What comes? He looked toward the castle outside his office window. Whatever is down there. The answer felt inadequate. We need something better than whatever. Dennis nodded slowly. Then he opened the final notebook. The oldest one. Construction records from the park founders. Most pages had deteriorated. Several were missing entirely. Yet one passage remained readable. Excavation revealed extensive underground structures. Workers report voices emerging from below. Project continuation approved despite objections. Additional containment measures recommended. Containment. Not safety. Not stability. Containment. The word lingered heavily. What were they containing? Dennis rubbed his face. Nobody knows anymore. The records disappeared decades ago. That answer frustrated me. Yet I suspected it was true. Too much history had vanished. Too many people had gone missing. Too many questions remained unanswered. 3 nights later, things became personal again. I arrived home after work and found muddy footprints inside my apartment. My blood ran cold immediately. They started near the front door, then crossed the living room, then ended outside my bedroom. Nothing else appeared disturbed. No forced entry, no theft, no damage. Just footprints. Large footprints, wet footprints, leading nowhere. I barely slept. Every sound inside the apartment felt threatening. Every shadow seemed wrong. When my alarm finally woke me that evening, I felt worse than before. The park no longer stayed inside park boundaries. That much was obvious now. The next shift brought cold rain, not heavy, just steady enough to soak everything. Employees hated rainy nights, for obvious reasons. By 3 in the morning, everyone felt tense. The parade had not appeared for several weeks. That made nobody feel safer. The opposite, actually. It felt overdue. I spent the hour repairing electrical equipment near Main Street. Rain tapped against rooftops. Water ran across pavement. The park sat eerily quiet. Then the music started. Trumpets, drums, applause. My stomach immediately dropped. Around me, several employees lowered their heads. Nobody hesitated anymore. Experience had taught us well. The music sounded different this time. Closer, much closer. I kept my eyes fixed downward. Rainwater pooled around my boots. The parade moved somewhere ahead. I could hear wheels rolling. Crowds cheering. Children laughing. Then something impossible happened. A hand touched my shoulder. Every muscle locked. The contact felt real, warm, human. My entire body trembled. Slowly, a familiar voice spoke beside my ear. It was my mother again. Exactly her voice. Exactly her tone. I miss you. Tears filled my eyes instantly. The grief hit harder than before. The voice sounded perfect. Every memory returned. Every loss. Every regret. The hand remained on my shoulder. Just look at me, I nearly did. God help me, I nearly did. Then another sound interrupted. A broom scraping pavement. Slow, steady, familiar. The janitor. Somewhere nearby, his broom continued moving. Back and forth, back and forth. The simple sound grounded me. The hand disappeared. The voice stopped. Minutes later, the parade faded away. Silence returned. When I finally looked up, the plaza stood empty, except for one person, the janitor, sweeping, watching me. He gave the smallest nod, as though approving a difficult choice, then resumed working. That moment stayed with me, more than any ghost, more than any disappearance, because it felt like the first time somebody had actively protected me. The following night brought the worst discovery yet. Around 2 in the morning, engineers reopened sections beneath the castle. Structural concerns forced another inspection. Dennis requested maintenance support. Unfortunately, that included me. Several workers entered the underground corridors together. Nobody wanted to be alone. The deeper sections felt different now. Colder, damp, wrong. We eventually reached the old chain door. My stomach tightened immediately. The chains hung loose. Every lock remained attached. Yet the door stood slightly open. Nobody spoke. The silence felt suffocating. One engineer slowly approached, flashlight beam trembling. He pushed the door wider. Beyond it stretched darkness, endless darkness. The tunnel descended sharply downward. Ancient stone walls vanished into blackness. Then we noticed something. Footprints. Hundreds of footprints, leading upward. Not downward, upward, from the tunnel, into the park. A terrible realization settled over the group. The missing employees were not trapped below anymore. Something had opened the door. Something had allowed movement both directions. Before anyone could react, a distant sound echoed through the tunnel. Footsteps. Many footsteps. Slow. Steady. Climbing toward us from somewhere deep below. Nobody needed instructions. We ran. Every person turned immediately. Radios fell. Tools dropped. Nobody cared. The footsteps continued behind us. Calm. Unhurried. As though whatever approached new escape no longer mattered. We reached the surface moments later. Security sealed the corridor again. New chains. New locks. New barriers. Yet everyone understood the truth. The door had already opened once. That was enough. And later that morning, while driving home beneath a gray autumn sky, I realized something that terrified me more than anything before. We had spent months worrying about what lived beneath the castle. We should have been worrying about what had already come out. The week after the tunnel incident felt like the final days before a storm. Everyone sensed something approaching. Nobody knew exactly what. Employee turnover stopped completely. New hires never lasted beyond a few shifts. Some quit. Others simply never returned. The remaining staff formed a strange community. We shared information, watched each other, followed the rules carefully. The park itself seemed different, less stable, more active. Strange sightings happened daily now. Guests reported conversations with people who vanished moments later. Security cameras captured figures walking through locked buildings. Ride control systems activated without power. The impossible had become routine. Management stopped pretending otherwise. Around mid-October, Dennis gathered senior staff after closing. Mark and I attended because maintenance now handled emergency responses. The meeting took place inside a conference room beneath the administration building. Dennis looked exhausted, worse than ever. Several pages rested on the table. Handwritten notes, incident reports, maps. We are running out of time. Nobody argued. He pointed toward a blueprint of the park. Red markings covered the central section. The castle sat at the center of every line. Activity keeps spreading outward, faster each week. What happens when it reaches the edge? Somebody asked quietly. Dennis did not answer immediately. Eventually he looked up. We do not know. That silence said enough. Later that night, Mark and I sat near the maintenance garage. Neither of us felt like working. The cold air carried fallen leaves across empty pavement. For a while we simply listened to the wind. Then Mark spoke. I found something. His tone immediately caught my attention. What? He handed me a folded document, old paper, faded ink, a letter. I opened it carefully. The handwriting appeared ancient. The date shocked me. 1953, the year the park opened. The letter came from the original construction supervisor. Most of it described excavation work. Then I reached the final page. The workers insist voices continue beneath the hill. Several refuse further excavation. One disappeared yesterday. Others claim he entered the opening willingly. I no longer believe we are building over something. I believe we are feeding it. My pulse quickened. The final paragraph disturbed me most. If the seals fail, the caretaker will know what must be done. I looked up immediately. The caretaker. Mark nodded. We both thought the same thing. The janitor. The following evening, I searched for him earlier than usual. Near midnight, I found him beside the castle. Same path, same broom, same expression. Thank you. He nodded. Then I showed him the letter. The old man's eyes settled on the paper. Something changed in his face. Not surprise, recognition. Caretaker. I pointed toward the word. That is you. The janitor remained silent. For several moments, I thought he would ignore me. Then he spoke. Once. The answer barely sounded human. What does that mean? The old man looked toward the castle. I was not the first. A chill moved through me. How many caretakers were there? The broom stopped. Many. The answer raised even worse questions. What happened to them? The old man's gaze drifted toward the ground. They stayed. Before I could continue, he resumed sweeping. The conversation ended there. Yet one realization settled firmly into place. The janitor was not protecting the park. He was maintaining something, watching something, containing something. 2 nights later, everything changed. The shift began normally. Cold weather, light crowds, routine maintenance. Then, around 1:30, every light in the park went out simultaneously. Complete darkness swallowed everything. Guests screamed. Ride systems shut down. Emergency generators failed. The entire property vanished into blackness. Radios erupted instantly. Confused voices filled every channel. Nobody understood what happened. Then the knocking started. Not beneath the castle. Everywhere. Knock, knock, knock. Hundreds of impacts echoed across the park. Beneath pathways. Beneath buildings. Beneath rides. The sound surrounded us. Guests panicked. Employees scrambled to evacuate people. Flashlights cut through darkness. The atmosphere descended into chaos. Then came the music. Parade music. Loud. Closer than ever before. My blood ran cold. The parade should not have been possible. Thousands of guests still occupied the property. Yet the music rolled through darkness anyway. Trumpets. Drums. Applause. Laughter. Every sound amplified. Every sound wrong. Somebody screamed nearby. Then another. The radio channels became useless. Too many voices. Too much panic. I lowered my eyes instinctively. Around me, experienced employees did the same. New workers did not. Several people looked up. I know because I heard their reactions. Confusion first, then fascination, then silence. Complete silence. The music continued. Minutes dragged past. Eventually, emergency lighting flickered back to life. Dim yellow illumination spread across the park. The parade had vanished. The guests had not. Yet something felt different. Wrong. Security quickly confirmed it. 47 people were missing. Guests, employees, security staff. 47. Gone. Without explanation. Without evidence. Without trace. The event broke whatever remained of normal operations. The park closed immediately. Public statements blamed electrical failures and evacuation confusion. Nobody believed them, especially those of us who had witnessed the truth. For the first time, even Dennis looked defeated. The following night, despite the closure, staff still reported for emergency duties. The property felt abandoned. Empty pathways stretched beneath silent rides. No laughter. No music. No guests. Just cold wind. Around midnight, security footage revealed movement near the castle. Hundreds of figures stood throughout the plaza, motionless, facing the structure. Every missing employee, every missing guest, every vanished person. They simply stood there, watching, waiting. Cameras recorded them clearly. When security teams arrived, the plaza was empty. Yet the footage remained. Nobody could explain it away. Around 3 a.m, another rule appeared. Rule 9. If the castle gates open after closing, leave immediately. Do not return until sunrise. Nobody knew who wrote it. Nobody questioned it. The reason arrived sooner than expected. Near 4 alarms activated across the property. Every radio channel transmitted the same message. Castle access detected. Castle access detected. Castle access detected. I was already nearby. So was Mark. So was Dennis. We reached the plaza together. The sight stopped all three of us. The decorative gates surrounding the castle stood open. They had never opened before. Not once. Not according to any employee. Yet now they swung wide beneath pale security lights. Beyond them stretched darkness. Not ordinary darkness. Something deeper. Something that seemed to absorb light itself. My heartbeat accelerated. Nobody moved. Then a voice spoke behind us. The janitor. It is time. We turned simultaneously. The old man stood beside the fountain. Broom in hand. Expression solemn. Time for what? Dennis asked. The janitor looked toward the castle. The final lock is failing. Every word landed heavily. Mark stepped forward. Can it be stopped? The old man remained silent. Then he answered, perhaps. That single word carried little comfort. We stared toward the open gates. Cold wind emerged from beyond them. Not from above, from below. Like breath rising from a deep place, the janitor slowly approached us. For the first time, he looked tired, ancient, fragile. The caretaker must close the door. My stomach tightened. What door? The old man pointed toward the castle. The first door. The original door. Silence settled over the plaza. Then Dennis asked the question haunting all of us. What happens if nobody closes it? The janitor looked toward the dark opening. His expression became impossibly sad. Then the park ends. And standing there beneath cold October skies, staring at gates that had never opened before, I realized the story was finally approaching its end. Whatever waited beneath the castle was no longer hiding. The locks were failing. The barriers were breaking. And somewhere below us, in darkness older than the town itself, something was preparing to emerge. The janitor led us through the open gates without another word. Dennis walked first. Mark stayed beside me. None of us wanted to be there. Yet none of us turned back. The castle loomed overhead. I had spent months working near it. Months staring at it from a distance. Somehow this was the first time it felt alive. The darkness beyond the gates seemed to pulse. Not visibly, more like a sensation, a pressure against my skin. The deeper we walked, the quieter everything became. Wind disappeared. Radio chatter vanished. Even our footsteps sounded muted. Eventually, we reached a maintenance entrance hidden behind the castle. The old man opened the door. A narrow staircase descended below ground. I immediately recognized the corridor. This was part of the underground system. Only deeper, much deeper. We followed him downward. The air grew colder with every level. Moisture covered the walls. Strange markings appeared more frequently. Thousands of scratches covered the stone. Some looked ancient. Others appeared fresh. The further we descended, the less the place resembled a maintenance tunnel. Eventually, concrete disappeared entirely. Only stone remained. Rough walls surrounded us. Natural walls. Ancient walls. Then we reached a chamber. I stopped breathing for a moment. The room was enormous. Larger than any structure above ground. Massive stone pillars rose into darkness. Their tops vanished from sight. At the center stood a circular opening, the original doorway. At least that was what I assumed. Because nothing else fit the description. The opening stretched nearly 30 feet across. Blackness filled it completely. Not darkness. Blackness. Absolute and unnatural. Looking at it felt wrong. Like staring into something that should not exist. Around the edge stood dozens of figures. Motionless figures. Missing employees, missing guests, missing security guards. Every vanished person. They formed a silent circle around the opening, facing inward, watching, waiting. Caleb stood among them. Travis stood nearby. Hundreds of empty eyes reflected faint light. None moved. None blinked. Mark whispered something under his breath. Dennis simply stared. The janitor approached the opening slowly. Then he stopped. The caretaker closes the door. His voice sounded weaker now, older somehow. Dennis stepped forward. How? The old man looked toward the darkness. Someone must remain. Silence filled the chamber. My stomach immediately sank. Remain where? Nobody answered. Deep inside the opening, something moved. The motion lasted only a second. Yet it froze all of us. A shape shifted within the blackness. Vast, slow, impossible to define. The air pressure changed instantly. Every light flickered. Several of the motionless figures turned their heads toward us. Not all, just enough. Then a sound emerged from the opening. Knocking. 3 slow impacts. Louder than ever before. The entire chamber trembled. Dust fell from above. Another 3 knocks followed. Then another. The thing below knew we were there. Dennis looked toward the janitor. There has to be another way. The old man shook his head. There never was. Another movement appeared inside the darkness, larger this time. For one terrible moment I thought something would emerge. Instead, a voice drifted upward. Soft, familiar. My mother's voice. Mark stiffened beside me. Then another voice followed. His father. Then dozens more. Hundreds more. Dead relatives. Missing friends. Lost loved ones. Every voice calling from below. Every voice inviting us closer. The chamber filled with them. I pressed my hands against my ears. It barely helped. The voices felt inside my head, inside my memories. The figures surrounding the opening began smiling, slowly, uniformly. The same smile I had seen on the Ferris wheel. The same smile from the parade. The same smile from every impossible encounter. Then the janitor stepped forward. For the first time, he stopped carrying the broom. He placed it gently on the stone floor. A strange sadness crossed his face. I understand now, he said quietly. Nobody knew what he meant. The old man turned toward us, especially toward Dennis. You must remember the rules. Then he stepped into the darkness. Everything happened at once. The chamber shook violently. The smiling figures froze. A sound unlike anything I had ever heard erupted from below. Not a scream, not a roar. Something older, something vast. The darkness inside the opening twisted inward, like water draining down a hole. The voices vanished instantly. The pressure disappeared. Wind rushed through the chamber. The ground trembled again. Cracks spread across surrounding stone. Dennis shouted for us to move. We ran. Nobody argued. Nobody hesitated. The chamber collapsed behind us. Massive impacts echoed through the tunnels. Stone shattered. Dust filled the air. We climbed stairways 2 steps at a time. The sounds continued below, then suddenly stopped. Complete silence followed. We emerged outside the castle moments before sunrise. Security personnel rushed toward us. Emergency crews arrived. Nobody understood what had happened. Neither did we. Not completely. The castle remained standing. The gates had closed. The strange darkness was gone. Most importantly, the knocking had stopped. Days passed, then weeks. The park remained closed indefinitely. Engineers inspected every structure. Officials issued statements. Construction fences appeared everywhere. Yet nothing supernatural happened. No parade music. No mysterious guests. No phone calls. No figures near the castle. The silence felt strange after everything we had experienced. Eventually, people began relaxing. Even Dennis seemed lighter. Mark smiled more often. Employees talked about reopening schedules. Normal conversations slowly returned. Part of me wanted to believe it was over. Another part refused. Winter arrived. Snow covered the empty park. Most staff transferred elsewhere. I found another job. Better pay. Better hours. No haunted attractions. Life slowly returned to normal, at least on the surface. Then, 3 months later, I received a package. No return address. No note. Just a small cardboard box. Inside rested an old photograph. I recognized it immediately. The construction photograph. The one showing the hill before the park existed. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed something new. Something I had somehow missed before. A figure stood near the excavation site, holding a broom. the janitor. But that was not the disturbing part. Behind him stood another man, same uniform, same broom, same face. Another caretaker. I turned the photograph over. A single handwritten sentence appeared on the back. The door closes. The caretaker remains. For a long time I sat staring at those words. Eventually I put the photograph away. I tried forgetting about it. Mostly I succeeded. Months passed. Then nearly a year. The park eventually reopened under new ownership. News articles describe renovations, new attractions, new management. Guests returned. Business recovered. Life continued. Last week, while driving through Toledo for work, I stopped at a gas station, the same one where Mark first called me. I bought coffee, filled my tank, stood outside beside my car. For a moment, everything felt ordinary again. Then I noticed somebody across the parking lot, an elderly man sweeping the pavement. The broom moved slowly, methodically. The man never looked up. My chest tightened. The distance was too great for certainty, yet something about him felt familiar. Very familiar. I watched for several seconds. Then a truck passed between us. When it moved on, the man was gone. No broom. No footprints. Nothing. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. I got back into my car and drove away. That should have been the end. But 2 nights ago, my phone rang at exactly 3 a.m. Unknown number. I already knew I should not answer. I answered anyway. At first there was only static. Then came 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. The line remained silent for several seconds. Then a voice spoke. Calm, familiar. The voice belonged to the janitor. It was safer when the park was feeding it. The call ended immediately. I have not slept much since then. Because yesterday morning, construction workers outside Columbus discovered a collapsed tunnel system beneath an abandoned fairground. The article barely received attention. Most people ignored it. One detail stayed with me. Workers reported hearing knocking beneath the rubble. 3 slow knocks, repeating from somewhere deep underground. And for the first time since leaving the park, I started wondering whether the door beneath the castle was ever truly the only one.